The gleaming marble floors of Morrison Corporate Tower reflected the harsh fluorescent lights as Madison Pierce clicked her designer heels across the lobby. Her perfectly manicured fingers gripped her phone, barking orders to some unfortunate assistant on the other end. "I don't care if the client is running late. We close this deal today or heads will roll," she snapped, her voice echoing through the pristine space. Near the elevator bank, an elderly man in a faded blue janitor's uniform slowly mopped the floor. His weathered hands gripped the handle with practiced ease. But Madison noticed something that made her stop mid-stride. Pinned to his chest was a small bronze medal, tarnished with age. Madison ended her call and approached him with a smirk. "Excuse me, old man. What's that little trinket you're wearing? Did you win it at some community center bingo game?" The janitor, Frank Martinez, looked up with kind brown eyes that held depths of experience Madison couldn't fathom. "It's nothing important, miss. Just something from a long time ago." "Oh, come on," Madison laughed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Let me guess. Perfect attendance at janitor school, employee of the month at some fast food joint." She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo. "This is too precious. My friends will love this." Frank's shoulders sagged slightly, but he simply returned to his mopping without another word. "Welcome to Grateful Stories, where we explore the moments that remind us never to judge a book by its cover. Today's story will show you why respect should never be based on appearance or position, and how sometimes the most extraordinary people walk among us in the most ordinary disguise. Let's uncover what really happened on that fateful Tuesday morning, and discover the truth behind the medal that would change everything. 47 years earlier, Lieutenant Frank Martinez crouched in the suffocating heat of a Vietnamese jungle, his uniform soaked with sweat and mud. At 22, he was the youngest squad leader in his battalion, but his men trusted him with their lives. The radio crackled with urgent static. "Charlie Company, we have intel on enemy movement 3 clicks north of your position. Civilians trapped in a village under heavy fire. You're the closest unit." Frank studied his map in the dim light filtering through the canopy. Getting to that village meant crossing open ground under potential sniper fire. It was a suicide mission. But 37 innocent lives hung in the balance. "We move in 5, he told his squad. "Stay low, stay together, and watch each other's backs." What followed was the longest day of Frank's life. 3 separate rescue missions into a burning village while bullets whistled overhead. He carried children on his back, helped elderly villagers to safety, and shielded families with his own body. When shrapnel from a mortar blast tore through his shoulder, he refused medical evacuation until every civilian was safe. His actions that day saved 37 lives. The Bronze Star with Valor was the military's way of saying thank you, but Frank never felt like a hero. He was just a young man doing what felt right. After the war, Frank returned home to a country that didn't always welcome its veterans with open arms. The nightmares came regularly. The sounds of helicopters made him freeze on street corners. Simple things like crowded spaces or sudden loud noises could send him spiraling back to those jungle firefights. He tried college on the GI Bill, but concentration was impossible when your mind constantly replayed the faces of friends who didn't make it home. He worked construction for a while, but his injured shoulder never fully healed. The pain was a constant reminder of that day in the village. Eventually, Frank found solace in simple, honest work. Cleaning gave him peace. There was something therapeutic about taking dirty, chaotic spaces and making them pristine again. It was quiet work that let his mind rest. No decisions that meant life or death. No one depending on him for survival. He'd been the night janitor at Morrison Corporate Tower for 15 years. The executives who occasionally worked late barely acknowledged his existence. He was invisible, just part of the building's infrastructure, and that suited Frank just fine. But he still wore his medal, not out of pride or for recognition, but as a quiet reminder of the man he used to be and the lives he'd helped save on the other side of the world. Madison Pierce was the embodiment of corporate success at 28. Harvard MBA, corner office, six-figure salary, and ruthless ambition that had trampled anyone who stood in her way. She saw the world in terms of winners and losers, valuable and worthless, important and insignificant. Service workers like janitors existed in her peripheral vision, barely human enough to warrant acknowledgement. In her mind, if they had any real worth, they wouldn't be pushing mops for minimum wage. The photo she'd taken of Frank's medal had already been uploaded to her social media with the caption, "When you're so desperate for attention, you wear fake military medals to your janitor job. The things people do for sympathy." Within hours, the post had dozens of likes and comments from her equally privileged friends, all mocking the old man who dared to wear something that suggested he might have once mattered. Madison basked in the attention, never considering that the quiet dignity in Frank's eyes might have been earned through experiences her sheltered life couldn't comprehend. Frank discovered the post that evening when his daughter Angela called, her voice tight with anger. "Dad, someone at your work is making fun of your Bronze Star online. The post is going viral." Frank looked at his phone screen, reading Madison's cruel words and the cascade of mocking comments below. Each laugh-crying emoji felt like a small betrayal. These strangers were dismissing the most defining moment of his life as some pathetic attention-seeking gesture. "It's okay, Mija," he told his daughter, though his voice carried the weight of old wounds reopening. "People don't understand. That's not their fault." But it wasn't okay. That night Frank sat in his small apartment, holding the medal in his weathered hands. He thought about putting it away, hiding it like he'd hidden so many other parts of his past. Maybe it was time to let that young soldier fade completely into memory. The next morning, Frank arrived at work as usual, but the medal was nowhere to be seen. He'd left it in his dresser drawer, alongside faded photographs and letters from the army that he rarely looked at anymore. Madison noticed immediately. "Oh, look who decided to stop playing dress-up," she said loudly as she passed him in the lobby. "I guess my post helped you realize how ridiculous you looked." Frank said nothing, but something inside him withered a little more. 3 days after Madison's post went viral, the glass doors of Morrison Corporate Tower opened to reveal a figure that commanded immediate attention. General Patricia Hayes, still imposing at 65, walked with the bearing of someone accustomed to respect and authority. Her dress uniform was immaculate, ribbons and decorations telling the story of a distinguished career. Her silver hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and her steel-grey eyes missed nothing as she surveyed the lobby. Madison, rushing toward the elevator with her usual urgency, nearly collided with the general. "Excuse me, are you lost? The building directory is over there if you need to find someone." General Hayes fixed Madison with a stare that had once made colonels nervous. "I'm looking for Frank Martinez. I believe he works here." "The janitor?" Madison's voice carried the same dismissive tone she'd used days earlier. "What could you possibly want with him? Did he apply for some kind of charity program?" The general's expression grew colder. "Young lady, I suggest you watch your tone when discussing Sergeant Martinez." At that moment, Frank emerged from the stairwell, returning from emptying trash bins on the upper floors. He froze when he saw the general, recognition dawning slowly across his weathered features. "Frank Martinez," General Hayes called out, her voice carrying across the marble expanse. Every conversation in the lobby stopped. Executives paused mid-stride. Security guards looked up from their posts. The usual bustling energy of the corporate environment came to a complete halt. Frank slowly approached, confusion evident on his face. "Ma'am, I think there might be some mistake." General Hayes stepped forward and, in a gesture that sent shockwaves through every witness, came to perfect attention and rendered a crisp military salute. "Sergeant Martinez, it is an honor to finally meet you." The lobby fell into absolute silence. Madison's mouth fell open, her phone nearly slipping from her suddenly nerveless fingers. Frank, instinctively responding to decades-old training, straightened his shoulders and returned the salute with precision that spoke of muscle memory never truly forgotten. "General Hayes," Frank said, his voice stronger than it had been in years. "I don't understand." "Sergeant, I've spent the last 3 days tracking you down after that disgraceful social media post came to my attention. Someone thought it was funny to mock your Bronze Star with Valor." The general's voice carried enough authority to make everyone within earshot take notice. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with official documents. "Frank Martinez, 3rd Battalion, Charlie Company. Bronze Star with Valor for extraordinary heroism in ground combat against a hostile force. 3 separate rescue missions under enemy fire, 37 civilian lives saved, wounded in action, but refused evacuation until mission complete." Madison felt the blood drain from her face as the general continued reading Frank's military record aloud. "Silver Star for gallantry in action during the siege of Firebase Delta. Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. Combat Infantry Badge. Vietnam Service Medal with 4 campaign stars." The general's voice grew stronger with each commendation. This man didn't just serve his country, people. He bled for it. The crowd that had gathered was now completely silent, all eyes moving between the decorated general and the janitor they'd walked past countless times without a second glance. General Hayes turned to address the growing audience. "In my 43 years of military service, I've met presidents, foreign dignitaries, and Medal of Honor recipients. But it's men like Sergeant Martinez who represent the very best of what our nation can produce. Ordinary people who, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, choose courage over safety, service over self-interest." She turned back to Frank, her formal demeanor softening slightly. "Sergeant, I understand you've been working here for 15 years. I also understand that someone thought your service was worth mocking online." Madison wanted to disappear, to melt into the marble floor and never be seen again. The general's gaze found her in the crowd, and those steel-grey eyes seemed to see straight through to her soul. "Young lady, I believe you owe this hero an apology." Every face in the lobby turned toward Madison. The executives she'd climbed over to reach her position, the security guards she'd never bothered to acknowledge, the cleaning staff she'd treated as invisible furniture, all staring at her with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. Madison's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The words she'd used so carelessly days before now seemed like the cruelest possible betrayal. She'd mocked a genuine American hero, a man who'd risked everything for people he'd never met. She stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But Frank, displaying the same grace he'd shown throughout his life, stepped forward. "It's all right, miss. You couldn't have known." "No," General Hayes interjected firmly. "It's not all right. This is exactly the problem. We've created a society where people think they can mock what they don't understand, dismiss what they don't value, and judge people based on their current circumstances rather than their character." She addressed the crowd again. "How many of you walked past Sergeant Martinez every day without a word? How many of you saw an old janitor instead of a man who put his life on the line for strangers? How many of you would have the courage to do what he did at 22 years old?" The silence stretched uncomfortably as people shifted and looked away, confronted with their own failure to see the extraordinary person who'd been among them all along. General Hayes reached into her briefcase again and pulled out a shadow box containing Frank's medals, perfectly arranged against dark blue felt. "Sergeant Martinez, your daughter contacted the Veterans Administration when she saw that post. She told them how you'd stopped wearing your decorations because of public mockery. This is unacceptable." She handed him the shadow box with both hands, treating it with the reverence it deserved. "These medals don't belong in a drawer. They represent not just your service, but the lives you saved and the example you set. The Army has asked me to present these to you again, officially, with the recognition you never received when you came home." Frank's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the shadow box. The bronze star gleamed under the lobby lights, no longer tarnished but polished to perfection. Beside it sat his silver star, Purple Heart, and the other decorations that told the story of a young man's extraordinary courage. "There's more," General Hayes continued. "The Army has been looking for you for years. There are 37 people in Vietnam, now grandparents themselves, who have been trying to find the young American soldier who saved their lives. They've raised money to build a school in their village, and they want to name it after you." Frank's composure finally cracked. Tears flowed down his weathered cheeks as he clutched the shadow box to his chest. "I was just doing my job." "No, Sergeant. You were being a hero, and it's time the world knew it." The crowd in the lobby began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to thunderous appreciation. Executives, security guards, cleaning staff, and visitors all joined in, recognizing a man who'd walked among them unnoticed for 15 years. Madison found herself crying, overwhelmed by shame and a growing understanding of how wrong she'd been. Not just about Frank, but about her entire approach to judging people's worth. In the days that followed, Frank's story spread far beyond the walls of Morrison Corporate Tower. The video of General Hayes' presentation, recorded by a security camera and shared with Frank's permission, went viral for all the right reasons. Madison deleted her original post and wrote a lengthy apology, acknowledging her cruelty and ignorance. She began volunteering at the local VA hospital, learning to see veterans not as stereotypes or burdens, but as individuals with stories worth knowing and respecting. Frank returned to work the next day wearing his bronze star with quiet pride. But something fundamental had changed. Executives now stopped to shake his hand and thank him for his service. Young employees asked about his experiences, genuinely interested in learning from someone who'd seen so much of life. The building's CEO offered Frank a position in the company's new veteran outreach program, but Frank politely declined. He'd found his peace in the simple, honest work of keeping things clean and orderly. But now he did that work with the recognition and respect he'd always deserved. 6 months later, Frank traveled to Vietnam for the first time since the war. The village he'd helped save had indeed built a school, and children now learned in classrooms bearing his name. The elderly villagers, who remembered that terrible day, embraced him with tears and gratitude that transcended language barriers. As Frank stood in the school courtyard, watching children play where once bullets had flown, he understood that some medals can't be pinned to a uniform. The real recognition comes from lives touched, respect earned, and the quiet knowledge that when the moment demanded everything, you gave it. Madison never forgot the lesson learned in that marble lobby. She built a successful career, but now she measured success differently. She learned that true strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down, and she never again judged anyone based on their appearance or current circumstances. Because sometimes the most extraordinary people walk among us in the most ordinary disguise, waiting not for recognition or applause, but simply for the basic respect that every human being deserves. The next time you see someone serving others in a humble capacity, remember Frank Martinez. Remember that behind every uniform, every name tag, every person doing honest work, there might be a story of courage, sacrifice, and heroism that would humble us all. In a world quick to judge and slow to understand, be the person who sees beyond the surface. Be the person who offers respect before demanding it. Be the person who recognizes that true nobility isn't found in corner offices or designer clothes, but in the character we show when nobody important is watching. Because the measure of our society isn't found in how we treat those with power and privilege, but in how we honor those who serve quietly, love unconditionally, and sacrifice willingly for others. That's the real story behind the medal, and the real message of grateful hearts everywhere.